Welcome to the Hot Sheet, where we go inside the biggest shows and uncover how they are really made. Today, we're sitting down with Emmy award-winning filmmaker Phil Bertelsen, the director-producer behind Netflix's Who Killed Malcolm X. This is a series that didn't just tell a story, it changed history, triggering a real investigation and helping overturn wrongful convictions decades later. If you're interested in this kind of content, hit that subscribe button. Now let's get to the episode.
There are a lot of great films. Some are there to entertain, some are there to just inform. But I feel like this film is the kind of film that helps shape our culture and really changes history and how we think of ourselves. And it's a powerful film. It's a powerful film. And I love how it starts with a question, because a great question always leads to a great answer and hopefully a great film. But like, who killed Malcolm X? That is a great question. So how did a story, why was that question so pervasive?
Well, thank you for the kind words with regard to the series. And I certainly didn't make it alone. I had a great, strong team of co-creators, not the least of which was my directing and producing partner, Rachel Dretson. But the question of who killed Malcolm X was one we started asking 55 years after he was assassinated, and 3 men went to prison for the crime. But it was pretty, shall we say, widely known that 2 of those 3 men were wrongly convicted. There just hadn't been the evidence presented in such a way that that conviction, or those convictions, I should say, were called into question until we did the series. And it was at that point, when Netflix put it on, back at the height of the pandemic, when everybody was held captive, that the Manhattan District Attorney reopened the case. Because of the evidence that we had presented in the film, there was some reasonable suspicion that these men, in fact, were wrongfully convicted, and in the end were shown to have been. New evidence emerged, and the DA vacated those convictions, exonerated those men, and made them and their families millionaires as a result of wrongful imprisonment.
Wow. What was the moment for you personally that made you say, I've got to go cover the story of Malcolm X's assassination?
I had been working with my producing partners at Arc Media for some years at that point, and they were developing this series and wanted my input. And it was really actually initially something I was a little leery of. I knew the circumstances surrounding Malcolm's death. I knew the fervor of the Nation of Islam with regard to his death. And I kind of didn't want any part of, conspiracy theories and, dangerous proclamations of guilt and innocence that I wasn't sure I could prove. But in the end, I took it on along with my team with the confidence of knowing that they were doing the work as well, and that we weren't going to put forward anything that we didn't feel was true. And quite honestly, it was Abdul Rahman Mohammed, who is our citizen sleuth in the series, who really convinced me that this was a righteous endeavor. He had spent the better part of his adult life in pursuit of the actual assassins. And he had it on good measure that he knew who the man was and wanted to go after him. And so we set about doing just that. There'll be a few spoiler alerts along the way. So.
Oh,
in
good.
this episode there will be. So go watch the movie, hit the pause button, go to Netflix, watch the movie, then come back, subscribe to the Hot Sheet, and watch the Hot Sheet. There you go.
Yeah. Don't forget to subscribe. Always. But the question, who killed Malcolm X, so that plagued Abdul Mohammed for years. Why was that such a deep question for him? Why was that unsettling for him personally? I know you kind of cover that in the film a bit, but that's a lot of years to commit to a question. And like, what was it that made him say, hey, I want to do something about this?
That's a good question. I think only he can answer truthfully. But what I took away in my time with him was really his quest was rooted in his faith as a Muslim. And he felt that his faith was basically besmirched by this, and that it was his duty as a practicing Muslim to find truth, and not let the lie continue to live. And so for him, it was really that kind of righteous indignation that set him on his path. And he made great sacrifices along the way to do his research. He was not a part of any institution. In fact, when we met him, he was a tour guide at the Arlington National Cemetery.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Wow.
prior to that, he was a security guard at the National Museum of the African American History in DC. So he's a working man citizen, and someone who felt deeply, deeply concerned that this crime had gone unpunished for too long, and he was going to do everything he could to see to it that it got settled properly. He also appears, and this is one of the motivating things that got us involved. He appears in a biography about Malcolm X by Manning Marable. It was a Pulitzer Prize winning biography published just before Marable died. There's another biography on Malcolm X published about the same time the series went to air, whose author also died.
Wow.
So you can
Wow.
imagine my
Yeah.
weariness about publishing our truths of this
Yeah.
story. But I mean, these men died of, natural causes, and they were advanced age and so forth, but had spent Les Payne was the author of the second biography. But yeah, so there's a lot of mystery surrounding Malcolm's death, and we were glad to shed some light.
Abdul, how did you find him? Did he come to you? Like, was it just through the autobiography you just talked about? Like, how did you guys find him? Was the film
Abdul,
built around him?
Abdur was in the biography, but interestingly enough, we and my producing partners at Archival were making a film about Martin Luther King, the media and the movement. And there is a scholar by the name of David Garrow who is known to be, an expert on FBI infiltration and so forth. And we were talking to him about Martin Luther King. And we said, look, we're getting ready to do this thing on Malcolm X. Who do you know that knows the most about the circumstances around his death?
Wow.
And he said unequivocally, Abdul Rahman Mohammed. And you can find him in Washington, D.C. He knows the
Oh.
most. And
You
that,
hit a home run with him. I mean, he's
yeah,
amazing. Like,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. We thought it was a single at first, and then we kept running the bases. And I'm like, next thing, no, like rounding third. And it's like, let's go with this guy. He can carry it,
Yeah.
So he became our guy.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's as a filmmaker, it's great when something like that happens, right? It's
Yes,
really
that, call it what you will, but that's kind of divine intervention when you think about it. When you're trying to shape a story, you're trying to figure out, how to move it forward in a compelling way, in a way that the audience can connect to. And as you say, Jenn, stay entertained and informed at the same time. He became our guy, and we were grateful for him. And I think he was grateful to have had the opportunity and the platform.
Well, it's just it's incredible to be on this mission for so long, this sort of solo citizen sleuth, as you say, and, kind of putting the pieces together and then all of a sudden having a team to help you out. And how did that connect to Netflix? Did you guys pitch to Netflix or did they come to you, or how did these films come together? Because I think a lot of, now we're sort of in this risk averse environment where people want to know the outcome, and you guys just kind of had an idea and had no idea where you were going with this idea. So how do you sell a show like that, and how did Netflix get involved?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because we are in a very different climate now. I mean, it's been streaming on Netflix for 6 years now, since February 2020. And it was 2 years prior to that that we started to make the film. So it's going on 8 years plus for this endeavor. But Netflix was the second window. We actually pitched and sold this series to a now defunct cable network called Fusion. And we literally were the last thing keeping the lights on at that station. It had folded
Wow.
during the time we were making the series. The series itself was threatened with not being finished. Never quite had enough money or time to do it. Made a big pitch to get some additional resources. They granted us that, not as much as we'd wanted, but enough to get us over the finish line. And Netflix and Fusion had this kind of second window relationship. And so that's how it landed at Netflix and has been on the shelf ever since. I guess
Wow.
getting enough algorithmic audiences
Yeah.
to keep it there. So
Yeah.
we feel very fortunate about that. They were involved in the series before they put it on their platform. So
Okay.
we were hearing from the executives there, but we had no real formal, ties. Our ties were to Fusion, and Fusion was dealing with Netflix, and so they always knew it was going to land there.
That's so
But
interesting.
I will add this, though. What's really different about this climate and why a series like this would not have been made, whether it's at a streamer or a cable outlet, is because this was an unsolved mystery. There was no clear path to anything really, other than the one person who was known to be hiding in plain sight in Newark, New Jersey. And there was no guarantee we were ever going to confront him or that confrontation was going to lead to anything. This was purely, based on the trust of our own talent as journalists and filmmakers and Malcolm X's story, like the little known aspects of his life that had gone untold, to say nothing of the circumstances around his assassination, which we were going to reinvestigate fully, which we did. So, now you just can't make films that are journeys without a destination. There's
Yeah.
just no heart for that. Hopefully that'll shift, but
Well, nobody
had
wants
we been pitching
to
this series now, it would.
nobody wants to invest in uncertainty now. They want, finality. They want to know the answer.
Yeah, we also had Joe Berger on the hot
And
sheet here, and he talked about the same thing. Like the verite, like just like it just doesn't happen. No executive wants to put their career on on the line, I guess, for a film. And,
Known.
yeah, it's too bad, because that's where I think where you get a result like this, where you get a great movie, is when you take that gamble. And like Joe said, and when we spoke to him, it's going to be the first time filmmaker that lands on that, because
right,
they're hungry, and they're hungry, and they're going to take that risk.
right, right. And what happens when you don't take that risk is you restrict origination, you restrict something new and different, unsettling, and unique. Like all those qualities that you want storytelling to offer kind of get, amputated, if you will, by all the certainty that's needed. Because when you talk about certainty, you're basically talking about something we've already seen before, and an ending we already know is coming. And so that to me is a lot less interesting than taking the risk on uncertainty and coming up with not who killed Malcolm X, but who didn't, and rewriting
Yeah.
rewriting history in the process.
Yeah.
55 years after Malcolm X was assassinated, you guys were doing this film, which is amazing. So what were the preconceptions that you had going into the film? What were the things that you wanted to try to uncover? What was the sort of the mission of the film? And what were you fighting against, knowing that this film was or this story was 55 years old.
Well, I'll start with the last question first. Knowing the story was over a half a century old, we knew there were a lot of witnesses that were dead and gone, and any that were still living were nearly dead, and many were not interested in going back 55 years and rehashing any of that business, particularly in the city of Newark, where we found ourselves spending a lot of time, because to your original question, the thing that really would thread the motivator of all of this was trying to track down the man who was, rumored to have been the shotgun dude, as the mayor of Newark, Ross Baraka, says in the series. The guy who actually fired the fatal shot that killed Malcolm. The gunmen that were arrested, only one of whom was actually at the Audubon that day, carried a pistol. We prove in the series that the pistol wasn't the kill shot, but this shotgun was. So we had that going for us. And so we set about trying to find this man, learn about this man, who he had become in the community. Turns out he appeared in a campaign ad for Mayor Cory Booker.
Isn't that crazy? I saw that. I thought that was so funny when I saw it.
That was one of my favorite moments in the film.
Now senator.
Yeah. All right. That was one of my favorite moments in the film when it's your voice. I hear your voice in the film, and you did a total gotcha moment. You could tell us about that gotcha moment.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, my producing partner, was doing the interview, and we knew we were going to get to a point where we asked him about this man. His name, government name, as they call it, was William Bradley. Asked if we had heard of him and knew of him, and he said, "Oh yeah." And then, Rachel proceeded to say something to the effect that, "Did you know he was, was rumored to have fired the kill shot that killed Malcolm?" He said, "No, that's news to me, and that you put him in one of your campaign ads." She went on to say, and that's when I kind of swooped in with my laptop and played the ad for him, and it's like, "Yeah, that's the guy. That's the guy." I had no idea he was, an assassin. And he kind of quickly gets off his mic and scurries out of there. But to his credit, he was honest about knowing him, but he wasn't aware that there was this tie to Malcolm's assassination at the time. He is now, and he told me as much recently when we shared the stage together at the 92nd Street Y. He's like, "I haven't heard the end of that since you guys." And he's like,
well, it sucks for, because it's like this guy, William Bradley, put on this front, or, became a changed man, and was a beloved person from the sounds of it in the community,
That's right. So Mustafa Shabazz, and he had a funeral fit for, dignitaries.
Like a hero, yeah.
And there's first spoiler alert, who killed Malcolm X dies, and so we turn our attention to who did it. But at that funeral, there was none other than the lieutenant governor, or then lieutenant governor of New Jersey, Sheila Oliver, who has since passed away. But we got an opportunity to sit down and talk to her and ask what she knew about him, and she said herself, he had become this redeemed figure and well respected in the community, and that we have a long history of redemption in our faith and our community, and doesn't he deserve the same?
That was incredible.
That was her claim.
Yeah.
And that of many others. Yeah.
That interview was incredible. Just for clarity, just because I had to look this up myself, and there's two names: your government name and then your Islamic name. So Cassius Clay is Muhammad Ali, same thing. William Bradley is Mustafa Shabazz.
Right.
So I was like, there's so many names, you have to keep it clear.
And Malcolm X himself becomes El Haj Malik Shabazz.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's on his grave.
So yeah, that's part of the Muslim faith, to change your name. The thought is that, the government gave you a name that's a slave name, that is ancestral to your slave owning ancestors, So they have no interest in continuing that line, and that's why they take Muslim names.
Right. Right. I just wanted to clarify that because there's a lot of names and you gotta keep it straight.
When you're making a movie like this and you're going into making a movie like this, you know it's going to be a lot of archival footage. I want to first of all give props, tip of the cap to your archivist, our archiving producer. How do you make a project like? How do you make a film like this? How do you make a TV show that is just archive driven? Where do you start?
That's a great question. And in this case, we started with the archival producer. Wyatt Stone is his name, and he was on the job before I was. He was collecting materials of all sort and manner, whether it's letters or ephemera and photos, video, obviously, newsreel footage, and so on, to see what the archive told us. And I've been making documentaries long enough to have seen the archival producer go from the last person on the team to the first person on the team. And the reason is, when you're telling a visual story, you want to know what the visuals tell you. So you're not looking for visuals to tell the story that you want to tell. You're telling the story that the visuals are telling. And if the visuals aren't telling pieces of the story, which is often the case, then you have to find another creative way to visualize that. But ultimately, if you rely on the archival from jump, you're in a better position to tell a more visually compelling story. And so we were fortunate to have the talents of Wyatt on that project. Yeah, he killed it.
The footage
really
is
really did.
It's incredible. So I was wondering, with all this beautiful archive footage, did the footage kind of dictate the interview questions, or did you find an archive footage to match the interviews? Because it's seamless between, you guys did a beautiful job stitching it together, because it's really complex to have all this footage and all this history to put together, but it was just, whatever they were saying was perfectly articulated with the footage, and the footage was supporting what they were saying. So I was wondering if you went back and forth, or if one kind of led the other.
That's a good question. It really is it's a conversation, really. It's a conversation between the archival. It's a conversation with the interviews. They're informing one another. In this particular series, we go to one clip multiple times. And we talk about it in various contexts, but it's the clip where Talmadge Hayer, who is the one assassin who was rightfully convicted and did his time, is being mauled outside the Audubon ballroom by,
Right.
Malcolm's followers, who capture him before able to escape. And the police get into the scrum. And at one moment, you see this man, Bradley, in the footage. And so there's a moment where we actually get this piece of footage. There's rumor that he's in it. And then we basically take the time to analyze it, almost forensically, to point out that he was there.
Wow.
And he actually walks off unattended.
Wow.
Into the night. So in that situation where the footage actually becomes evidence, right? And that's often the case, whether it's Malcolm's assassination or JFK's. Like, somebody has a piece of footage somewhere that shows a muzzle flare on the grassy knoll, and isn't it worth re-examining that?
Well, that's the beauty of, there's, the beauty of social media. There's a lot of challenges with social media, but the beauty is you have all this footage, right? And all these citizen sleuths are able to solve crimes now, like Don't Fuck with Cats on Netflix, another great film, where they found this cat killer who ultimately killed a person. And the cat lovers put together the evidence based on all the social media and stuff, and they helped solve the crime. I just love that. But this was the 60s, so all you had was film. You didn't have social media or CCTV.
Right.
You had people standing there with film cameras, not even digital cameras. So that's pretty unusual in and of itself.
Well, and it's not only unusual, but just think about it for a minute. I mean, because cameras were not ubiquitous, in this case, this was newsreel footage. Now,
Right.
I don't know when the news showed up, you know, whether they were there for the actual Audubon address or they heard rumors that there was an assassination attempt, but there was all this footage that documented the moments following the assassination. There were no cameras in the room.
Just
We had
outside the
audio,
room. Yeah.
actual audio, which is its own. We had audio inside the room, and you hear Malcolm's voice from the stage trying to calm people down because they created this basically distraction in order to make him vulnerable and step out from behind the podium and make himself exposed. Anyway, long story short, there's just a great deal of material that's available, and you just have to take each piece. Nowadays, Minnesota is a perfect example. Like, 2 civilians were killed by federal officers, and their cameras are there to make sure they
Everywhere.
can't lie about it.
Right.
You see what I'm
right.
saying? So,
Yeah,
and they're
definitely.
going to try and lie about it, but the fact remains, it's very important that citizens get involved and stay watchful and mindful and see that our law enforcement officials are upholding the law.
Yeah. Imagine if there were iPhones back then. It'd be case solved. Imagine the case. These guys
Yeah,
would not have
right.
gone to jail
You'd
for.
think.
Yeah. Crazy. Ah,
Well, in fact, these guys didn't have to go to jail. The fact is that they wanted this crime solved, this assassination solved, and they wanted to send to jail the men that they wanted off the street. It had nothing to do with actually enforcing the law. The FBI wasn't talking to the NYPD. The NYPD wasn't talking to the prosecution. There was at best, gross negligence surrounding the solving of that crime. At worst, government malfeasance.
yeah, it's pretty heavy stuff. And they closed it within a week. It was just days of like, oh, we got them. They're booked. They're in jail. Case closed. Yeah, we're done. And that
And
was
then the
it.
trial was its own farce. During the trial, as these 2 wrongfully convicted men were being railroaded, Talmadge Hayer, the one true assassin arrested for the crime, was like, those aren't the guys, but by then, he'd been considered an unreliable witness. And so they went to jail. 20 plus years of their life, lost the respect of their families and communities in the process. And when they re-entered civilian life, they were pariahs. And one of the men, Khalil Islam, never lived to see his conviction overturned.
He died in prison, right?
He died shortly after his
Or-
release, as
Oh,
I
okay.
understand it.
Okay.
I thought it was cool how you guys covered that with the family aspect, because no matter how many millions of dollars you get from being wrongfully convicted, you can't rebuild those relationships, right? And so hopefully
Yeah. You won't
they're
get that
able to get
time
a
back.
chance. Yeah, you don't get the time back. I mean, I'm a big time guy. Like, and time to me is so precious and like it is to so many people. But how you guys covered that in this film, when you went on to make this movie, was it gonna be a multiple part thing? Was it gonna be just a 90-minute thing originally? And then you just started landing on all these gold nuggets that you were just like, we got to keep going. I mean, what was your plan going into it as a filmmaker?
So it was always pitched as a 6-part series.
Okay.
We weren't sure how we were going to organize the material necessarily, but we knew there was enough for multiple parts. In fact, we got to a point where I remember mentioning earlier that we had to beg Fusion for more time and more money. At the same time, we were like, we really only have 5 episodes. We're like, so we wanted more time, more money, and we were going to give you less product. And they were like, yeah, no, you're going to give us 6. We'll give you a little more time and give you a little more money. But in the end, 6 was the right number. Could it have been less? Probably. We would have lost a character or something. But I felt it was a worthy 6. Again, in this marketplace, you'd be lucky to get 3 or 4.
The
So
market, yeah,
we came in at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and that's the thing for all the people watching this. It's like, what Phil said there, when you go in and you think you're gonna have this budget and you always end up asking for more. You always get it, but in today's Hollywood, you're not getting anything extra.
No,
You
you'd be lucky if you get enough to do what you intended. I was just going to piggyback on what you said about time, Sean, and the value of it. And it was true. I mean, as far as Mohammed Aziz is concerned, he had many children, grandchildren, even great grandchildren he never met.
Yeah.
So, his family, for the most part, with the few exceptions, a daughter, had disowned him. So, that hurt doesn't heal. And so no amount of money necessarily can make that go away. But it certainly helps heal the wounds. So he can live his life comfortably alongside his wife and whatever children and grandchildren decide they want to forgive him.
Did you ever do you know off camera, like did he, once they found out he was wrongfully accused, did those relationships mend at all? Like, I know you guys had to cut filming at a certain point, and so since then, do you know, has there been, like, this has come out, it's on Netflix, like, I'm sure those grandkids have friends who are like, your grandpa's a hero, like it's
Yeah. Liz, I wish I knew, but I don't have any way of knowing. He was a very reclusive and private figure prior to this series and returned to being one. We felt very grateful that he entrusted us with his story, and when the conversation turned from who killed Malcolm X to who didn't, we offered him this opportunity to go before the Manhattan DA in what is known as this conviction integrity unit, where you basically write a letter on behalf of what a person you consider to have been wrongfully convicted, stating their case. This person, whether they're incarcerated or formerly incarcerated, then has to basically endorse this effort.
right.
And the Manhattan DA then, has to make a decision as to whether or not they want to reconsider the case. And this is true in prosecutors' offices throughout the country in major metropolitan areas, where they, will re-examine cases because there are just so many wrongfully convicted people losing time behind bars.
you'd think if if that went through and his name was removed from all that, he would want that out there, like, come out of being a recluse again and just, like, SeaWorld, I told you. And maybe producer Phil has got to call Brandon Reig over at Netflix and say, let's do a follow-up. Let's do a two-part follow-up on this. And it'd be cool as a viewer that's watched it. I'm invested. I'd watch it. I'd want to know
Like,
what
where
happened.
is
I
he
do
now?
want to know what happened.
I'm all for that. I mean, I don't know how, willing he would be to participate in that. I do know that there is currently an active civil lawsuit being on behalf of the Shabazz family. This is Malcolm's daughters who are survivors. On behalf of Ben Crump, their attorney, is basically suing law enforcement, the U.S. government, the FBI, to get them to unredact these files. These are the Malcolm X files, not to be confused with the Epstein files. But basically, show behind the conviction and wrongful death of Malcolm X, because if they can prove that the government was somehow compliant here, then the Shabazz family can be rewarded as well.
Oh,
And
wow.
of all the victims, of all the crimes, the family of the slain leader is the one that I feel deserves the most.
Absolutely. That's incredible. Well, keep us posted and maybe you'll do a film on that. But getting back to the conviction integrity unit, so what did you guys know that that's what you wanted to do, was to kind of instigate a review and get the unit to look at your case? Or was that something that evolved once you had enough evidence to pursue getting that review?
That was something that evolved. That was not even in our mind's eye when we started out on this.
Wow.
But once Bradley died, we knew that that penultimate scene wasn't going to occur. So now what do we do? How do we put an end to this story when the end just went 6 feet
Ended.
under?
The end ended.
And that's,
Yeah.
we could have, I guess, ended with his funeral and had left it kind of unresolved. But, we were convinced not only by the storytelling of Mohammed Aziz, but the evidence that we were able to uncover in FBI documents. Keep in mind, this is all evidence that was available to any scholar, any filmmaker
Wow.
willing to take the time to put the pieces together. One of the things that did change, though, is when Bradley died, we were able to actually get his FBI file. And that is where, the evidence really laid, because we were now learning that this guy was somehow aligned with law enforcement. He had a criminal record that was a mile long, and that there would have been no reason for NYPD not to look at this man at the time of this crime, except and unless he was protected. And so we were able to raise enough suspicion around that, which is what I think led the Manhattan DA to make the decision to kind of take a closer look. I can't say, what was in the DA's mind, but I do know we did reveal new evidence and at the same time stitch together all the old pieces. So, as filmmakers, as documentary filmmakers and investigative journalists, that's our job, right? We get these puzzle pieces, and it's our job to put them together and show a different picture. And that's what we were able to do here. But we did learn about this conviction integrity.
Interesting. But if Abdul had never asked the question and you guys had never teamed up with him, who knows how long that story would have lain dormant until you guys uncovered the evidence. Like, that's pretty amazing.
I don't think there's a world where this wrongfully solved crime would have been set right had we not gone down this path, and had we not taken that extra step of writing the letter. Because truthfully, it was just for us a way to kind of wrap this thing up. We really had no expectation that the Manhattan DA was going to take us seriously, but there were a whole series of events that, called their attention to it, not the least of which was Barry Scheck and the Innocence Project, who knew we were on this path, who knew the series was coming. And Barry was like, hey, Cy, you might want to take a look at this thing. It's going to hit Netflix in February, literally over like Passover Seder, kind of thing. And that's how it got best of the DA. And we had formally filed this letter. So I kind of took that out of the pile and off they went.
And what was in the letter again?
Serendipity.
What was in the letter again?
The letter was our best case, our best case as to why this man was not the man, you thought he was. And, his alibi and all this stuff was, entered into evidence during the trial. Like, we weren't telling them anything new necessarily. But we did add that we had, uncovered evidence to suggest it wasn't this man, but another man. And, I'd have to revisit the letter. I don't know the exact wording, but it was something to that effect. And it was no more than a page and a half, and signed by Mohammed Aziz and Abdul Rahman.
And tell us about Cy Vance, the Manhattan DA, because he gets this paper and he doesn't have to do anything about it, or he decides to do something about it. What about him? Like, why do you think he ultimately decided to do something about it? And what does that say about him? What does that mean about him? he seems like a very interesting character.
Yeah, well, I wish I had the opportunity to ask him. I haven't. Um, I do know it was, basically his last dance. And in other words, he had already decided he was not going to run for Manhattan DA again. So he was leaving office. And, he made the decision that, he's going to roll the dice on this one. He had a great team of attorneys in that conviction integrity unit to re-examine the case, and it took them years to do it. Years before they decided to overturn the conviction. And so it was a lot of, um, as they say in the legal profession, spade work. Um, you know, it should also bear mentioning that the David Cheney's law firm is the one that really got behind Muhammad Aziz and his case. They decided to represent him, and they did a lot of the legal legwork to help the Manhattan DA, who was also doing their own investigation. So it was a combination of things. We unfortunately weren't allowed to kind of offer our research into evidence. We could say, look, all the evidence we have is here on screen. You can take that for what it is, but we couldn't become active participants in this litigation because of our role as journalists. So they were on their own. And so David Cheney's and his law firm deserves a lot of credit as well.
As a filmmaker, and for all the filmmakers watching this, how do you approach a DA, or how do you approach getting a case reopened? How do you, as a producer, make these worlds move?
On a wing and a prayer. You know what I mean? They're in no position to listen to you, take you seriously. They got better things to do. It's all in how you present yourself, your case. I think relationships have a lot to do with it. I don't think they take a second look unless Barry's check is saying you need to take another look. I mean, the Innocence Project and their work speaks for itself. So you don't want to get overrun by them. So yeah, it's a confluence of things. It's very political. So I only have so much political leverage that I can weigh. But again, there were enough interested parties, enough people that believed in the innocence of these men that were able to kind of back us up, if you will.
Yeah.
And so we got a look.
Yeah.
Well, one of the extraordinary things about the film is, first of all, the film's amazing in and of itself. It's, 6 episodes and it's so well done, and you should all see it. You should check it out. It's amazing. It's still on Netflix.
Definitely.
But the ripple effect of a film like this, and this is when I tying it back to what I was saying earlier, is this film didn't just entertain and inform, but it actually changed the course of history. It changes, our understanding of ourselves, the mistakes that we make in our time. And, it prompted this investigation, which had a whole other life in and of itself. So this film continued, like the effect of the film continued, into the real world, and ultimately to the exoneration of these 2 guys. But that's the amazing thing, that the power of film has the power of change and inspiration and all these things, and you guys just nailed it in that department. You really did. And maybe that wasn't entirely intentional, like it just kind of worked out like that way, because you asked a great question and then you got a great answer. And it's just kind of extraordinary. So I just, want to thank you for that. Like, I think as a filmmaker, it's just an extraordinary feat. And and how does that feel to you,
Yeah.
as a filmmaker, to know like that your film had such profound change, not only in the course of history, but these 2 guys' lives?
It feels great. I mean, obviously it's a watershed moment for me and my co-creators, Shayla, Naila, Rachel, the editors, Brian Funk, who, seamlessly wove together much of this material. We had plenty of editors on it, but he was the one that touched them all. It's just a great team of people that are committed to truth, and you just hope that truth prevails. It's not something you can repeat with intention. In fact, we were only intentional in the retelling of these events and these stories. We had no expectation it was going to lead to what it led to. So we're just immensely grateful and feel, it's just nice to be rewarded for the hard work and the trust and conviction that we had in telling this story.
It's amazing. And how long did it take from the time you submitted the review for the two men to get exonerated?
So we submitted the review probably in, I think it was December, maybe it was around the holidays of 2019. So the series at that point was airing on Fusion just before, like I say, they turned the lights off. And then it was going to go to Netflix. And so the Manhattan DA had enough time to kind of make a decision about whether or not they were going to reopen this case. And they timed it with the Netflix release, knowing it was going to go global and that maybe they want to get ahead of this, which they did. And so that
little
kind
bit of pressure, a little bit of pressure there.
Combustion. Yeah, yeah. So it was at that point that they went to work. Dave Shaney's and his team, Cy Vance and his team, and I think it was roughly 18 months to 2 years before they decided that these men were in fact wrongfully convicted. They got some new evidence to suggest that, there were alibis for these men that were legit, to say nothing of what they must have found in those FBI documents. Now, they got unredacted documents. They saw stuff that we didn't see.
Oh, wow.
And so I'd be very interested in knowing what that was. But all that to say, yeah, it was about 2 years after it landed on Netflix that these men were found to be innocent.
I thought one of them.
I mean, the series ends with a little coda,
Yeah.
but we don't really, and still today, you really don't know unless you know that these men actually.
Yeah.
Well, I love one of my favorite scenes was when Abdur. Am I saying his name right? I just want to make sure I'm saying his name right. Mohammed.
Abdul Rahman. Yeah,
Abdur. When he sits down.
Not Abdul Jabbar. Abdul Rahman.
When he sits down with Mohammed, Abdur sits down with Mohammed Aziz, and Mohammed Aziz is 81 years old. Abdur's like, hey, I kind of need your permission to pursue this review. He needed his signature. He needed his permission. And Mohammed's kind of timid, like, I don't know if I really want to do this. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't trust these guys. Like, he's obviously traumatized by his, 20 plus years in jail and losing his family and all this kind of stuff. Like, he just didn't want, but he ultimately said, okay, I'll sign. If you want to do it, I'll sign. I think that was such a powerful moment. Do you think that there was any, like, for a moment I was like, is he going to sign? Is he going to do it or no? Like, I was on the edge of my seat. Like, what do you think about that moment and how his hesitation, but ultimately his resignation to it? Like, I thought that was a powerful moment.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you pointed that out. One of the editors on the squad was Brian Cole, who cut that scene, and I'll never forget. He cut it 6 ways to Sunday, but I think he probably had about 2 hours of material, I would say easily, that he cut down into 8 or so minutes. And I offer that to the filmmakers to say that, if you're going to create a moment, you got to give it the time it needs. Like, that conversation between those two men was, exploratory. It was all over the place, getting to the point of this letter and getting his endorsement really was the objective. So every scene you produce, you kind of have an objective in mind, but it's never a clear path. And in the journey of that scene, you got a sense of that's the bitterness that Muhammad Aziz had toward, law enforcement and, his incarceration. I mean, he didn't just do time. That man was at Attica
Oh,
when
man.
Attica went down,
Whoa.
some of the most horrifying human, crimes you could imagine, just by being wrongfully convicted, right? So he wasn't in some, you know, Ghislaine Maxwell, vacation
Yeah.
home. He was
Yeah, he's not
doing hard
getting
time
lunch.
in the 70s.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No.
Damn.
So anyway, all that to say, you could see all of that coming back in that
Yeah, he's
moment. It was like,
angry.
he said, these are lying people. Like
Right,
he had
right.
no sense for the hope that this would lead to anything. That's where he was. That has changed, fortunately for him. But in that moment, he's like, yeah, you want to do it? You know, you have my blessing, but I don't trust it. And so,
It's
yeah, I
totally
mean,
totally understandable too, right?
completely,
Yeah. Yeah.
completely.
I really didn't think he was gonna sign. I thought he was gonna just hold out and say, "No, I'm done. I moved on." And but Abdur, he was so, you know, passionate and trustworthy and just, he was desperate to do it and just had the power of conviction and it was just kind of just a lovely moment
Yep.
in the film and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
paid
Yeah.
off.
And he like you owe it to your family, I mean, if nothing else,
Yeah.
clear your name for them.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that, you know, that was the winning, uh, persuasion.
Well, the crazy thing too, I was thinking this film brings up so many questions and things, but the great irony, I'm sure you've thought about this a million times, but that the two men convicted of killing Malcolm X were themselves victims of the very discrimination, that injustice that Malcolm was denouncing. It's just like, wow. What a world, right?
Yep. That's exactly right. And in the end, Malcolm's quest for justice in general, particularly for Black people, um, around the globe, um, and in particular the United States, it won the day. Took 55 years, actually, by the time these men were uh, exonerated was 58, give or take. But yeah, I'd like to think that Malcolm was smiling down in that moment. It's going to be 61 years since his assassination uh, this month.
Wow.
So, and his yeah, just his wisdom and yeah, just prevails. I mean, you see it every day. Like the things that this man was saying 60 plus years ago are still relevant today.
What can we learn from Malcolm
Well,
X? What can we take away from today?
well, I mean, Malcolm would obviously see this, police state that has been forming in this country under this regime to be quite troubling. I mean, he saw the overreach of law enforcement long before cell phones could show it on social media. So, I mean, that obviously is a very salient, prevailing wisdom of Malcolm's. Um, but one of the things I think is most miraculous about his life, given all that he had to endure, um, how he was a man evolving, like to the end, that he never stopped learning, he never stopped understanding, um, adjusting his, attitude, changing his direction to be more aligned with his convictions as a human, that there was, and his commitment obviously to his faith. But, when he departed from the Nation of Islam, Malcolm, I think, became his truest self. He was his own leader. And I think recognized his fealty to a flawed leader was what, got him into trouble in the first place, kind of thing. In spite of all the good that he did for that organization, for the Nation of Islam, Malcolm recognized that he was his own man and had his own beliefs and convictions, and stood by them, with truth. And so I think that's the thing. Like, I like to think, no matter how, I'm already older than Malcolm was when he was killed,
Um,
by a good measure, and I haven't stopped learning. Yeah. So, and I will never stop, hopefully.
What kind of face cream do you use, man? You don't look that old. What's your secret?
Yeah, black don't crack.
That's what they say.
All I got.
In all seriousness, though, I was going to ask, like, did Malcolm's family know about this film? Did you guys talk to them ahead of time?
They did know. Yeah, absolutely.
Was there more involvement with them that just wasn't shown, or how was all that?
The Malcolm's daughters are their own people, and they're not of like mind all the time. And so, we managed to get the support and involvement of Ilyasa Shabazz, who appears in the series and who was a great acolyte and advocate for the series when it came out. We had a big event at the Audubon Ballroom where we premiered an episode.
Oh,
I'll never
no
forget that
way.
night. It was on the
Wow.
anniversary of on the anniversary of his assassination, probably 2020. I think that was the year. They
Wow.
were like pouring out into the street to see this thing. So the family, for the most part, has been quite supportive, and we're happy to know that as a result of the series and these exonerations, that they saw fit to kind of, challenge the government for their own rightful, resolution to this crime. So, yeah, if you see the series, you know that Malcolm's home was firebombed a week before his assassination. It was like around Valentine's Day, 1965. And so typically a family like that would have memorabilia. Malcolm always had a camera with him. None of that stuff, has been able to survive the test of time because of that fire and other kind of mishandlings of effects. So the family, all they have are their memories of their father and the stories that their mother Betty told them, because they were all so young when he died. Two of them were, in utero. Betty was pregnant with twins at the time Malcolm assassinated. So they actually never met their father.
So one thing, speaking of that day, the day of his assassination, I have questions. I don't know if you have the answers to them, but his house was bombed. He knew he was a threat. Like, I think the opening line of the film was like, he knew he had a target on his back. He was outspoken. He was powerful. He had a target on his back. He knew it wasn't necessarily a matter of if it was going to happen. It was sort of like when, perhaps, when somebody was going to get him. So knowing that he was that vulnerable, why did he feel compelled to go to the ballroom that day? And especially when there was, no security really, no police, it was pretty easy to walk into the ballroom from what I could tell. Like, why would he feel compelled to do that, even though his life was like, he, he was in a moment, his life was being threatened essentially.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. I would love to ask Malcolm myself. I will say this, though. The only film to have ever done that scene better than ours was Spike Lee's Malcolm X with Denzel Washington. And if you get an opportunity, just watch that film. But if you've seen it again, go fast forward to that particular fateful day. And Spike somehow was able to get into Malcolm's psychology on that day. And I think, what we learned about him was he was a man with a mission. He was a man without fear. He was a man who was not going to be told where to go, when to be there, and how to behave when he got there. So he had a commitment to his followers. He was starting this new organization. His presence was called for on that day because he was a leader of a flock. And I'm going to borrow a phrase from a film I'm making about a former Black Panther retired congressman named Bobby Rush, who says, to be a shepherd, you have to smell like sheep. And what he was trying to say, which I can see in Malcolm, is that he was a man of the people. And so for him to be cowed by some threat, some lack of, protection from New York City police, who he didn't feel protected by anyway. They were not his protectors. They were his enemy. There was no other place for him to be. To be a shepherd, you got to smell like sheep. And that's where his flock was.
Wow.
And that's where he was going to be.
So he was going to go no matter what. That's wild. That is so wild. He just wasn't, one thing that stands out to me about him is he was just fearless. He did not care. He was willing to just be outspoken. And
actually, he cared deeply.
I guess so.
He wasn't without care.
Right.
It was like the opposite end of carelessness. It was cared so deeply that he was committed in the worst of times. And that's speaks to his fearlessness. It was like he was undaunted. That never changed about him.
Right.
That was the one thing that never changed.
He was 35 when he died? Is that right?
39.
39.
He and Martin Luther King didn't live to see their 40th birthday.
Wow. Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, it makes you think, there was a lot of, political violence and assassinations going on in the 60s, and cut to now 2026. Doesn't seem like the world has changed that much, right? With all the political assassinations that we've been through in the last couple years in this country. But there's something that just feels very different about then versus now, though. Even though, we're still having turbulent times, we're still, clashing cultures and trying to figure out who we are as a country and all that. But it just seems like in terms of political assassinations, it just seems now, and I could be totally wrong, but now it just seems like these operators are more, they have more of like an individual grievance. Like they're more lone wolves or something that have their own like online radicalization, and they're harder to like identify. They're harder to see the red flags. Whereas with Malcolm, it was obvious. Like the fact that he was assassinated didn't surprise anybody necessarily. He knew he had a target on his back. He knew who his enemies were. It was kind of clear that whoever it was, they weren't just solo operators. Whereas now it's like, Luigi Mangione, he didn't really seem, he just came out of the nowhere. He wasn't super problematic. People didn't think he was some weirdo. He just kind of got angry and, shot the United Healthcare guy in the face.
A matinee idol from a family of beings, yeah. And those eyebrows, geez, what I wouldn't give for those eyebrows. No, but seriously, I think so much of it has to do with this social media culture that we're now in. I mean, it's a very different landscape. I think in Malcolm and Martin and Kennedy's day, there were 3 major networks that you got all your information from. And, those networks were relied on to be truthful and honest. Now you just have a cacophony of voices and opinions that are filled with bias and malevolence, a lot of it, and it's hard to know fact from fiction unless you do your own research, and that's just not the case. We're living in this echo chamber where we're just hearing the voices that are already speaking to us. We're not hearing new and different opinions in the way we used to. But as for the lone wolf, I, I I hesitate to say that it's random, these acts of violence. I do think these lone wolves, if you will, exist in an echo chamber of their own, and they're being whipped into a frenzy um, in order to conduct the evil that they do. Even Charlie Kirk's assassin, like Charlie Kirk is whipping people up into a frenzy in his own echo chamber, and this was someone inside and outside of that who decided he wanted to do something about it. So it
Yeah.
it's different in that it doesn't feel as organized. It's a lot more
Right. Yeah.
it's harder to
It just
frame it.
feels like a personal grievance
Um,
versus just like a ideology. I don't know. I could be totally wrong. I'm still trying to figure this out, guys.
well, no, I mean, I
But
think those
you know,
personal grievances have support, right? They're not the only ones thinking that way in order to behave that way. Like they feel like they're going to represent a group of people who think the way they do by acting in a violent manner. But political violence is not new to this country. That's for sure.
Yeah.
that's for
Yeah.
sure. That is for sure. But thank
Or the wo-
goodness, the good side of
yeah,
having a phone is you can film it. You can film the crap out
yeah.
of any. It might be giving you bad info, but you can certainly film it.
Make sure your battery charged and you got enough memory. That's the new power to the people. Make sure your battery's charged and you got enough memory.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Oh my God. Your film is so well done and the outcome is so amazing, but is there anything that you would have done differently or anything that was particularly challenging that might have changed the course of the film along the way?
I mean, there were things I wanted to do that we weren't able to do, but I don't know that they would have changed the course of history or even the trajectory of the series. Um, it was hard to get access to some of the, intimate spaces that Malcolm inhabited. His home, for instance, in Queens, which is a stone's throw from LaGuardia Airport. I desperately wanted to get inside and, look around and kind of, commune with the spirit there. His mosque, mosque number 7, which is on the corner of 116th and Malcolm X Boulevard in Harlem, literally 1 block from where my apartment was at the time. Would
Wow.
love to have gotten my cameras inside there. They had an office that was Malcolm's office that was virtually untouched from the time he inhabited it. So that kind of thing. When you're doing biographies, it's an interesting experience because you are, communing with spirits, and spaces, really conjure that spirit and help, I think, inform the story. Um, so that's all. I mean, those kinds of things, retracing his steps and so forth, like would have been a nice to have, but not a need to.
Didn't make or break it, but maybe gave it a different texture or something. And then the challenge that I see, like the interesting thing as a storyteller is that your story, moves. It's this historical piece, so you're moving backwards and explaining what happened, but you're also moving forward because you have this question of like who killed Malcolm X. So how did you guys balance those two directions of the film? And was that hard, or how did you find your way that way?
Yeah, all respect to Brian Funk, our lead editor, who helped crack the code, but it took a minute, to be
I
honest,
bet.
and many
Yeah.
editors before we figured out, you know, the rhyme and reason of this series. And I think, what enabled us to go back and forth in time was the fact that we had Abdul Rahman. We had you know, a person on a journey, in present day, who could take us back, uh, uh, from now to then. Um, but also in terms of organizing the material, we had all the biographical elements of Malcolm's life. We had his relationship to the Nation of Islam. We had the Nation of Islam itself as a story that was lesser told and that needed some real framing and understanding. So we had all these different elements that in the end, became the building blocks for us. So it wasn't a chronological tale that we were telling. It was really a thematic one, related to all these various elements, whether it was obviously the assassination, which was leading us, but all the various aspects to Malcolm's life leading up to that. We do go back to his childhood, but very briefly. I mean, we spend the bulk of our time in our storytelling in those last, years, if not the last year of his life. So that became the framing device for us. But it wasn't, it didn't come easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trial and error.
Well, it's so well done. I mean, I just am impressed by the artistry of that, because I think, to a viewer, you probably don't understand the decisions that are being made behind the scenes to put intricately tie those things together, the forwards and the backwards, and how do you establish who he is, but where are you going with the story? And, like that intricate weaving that you guys did is, I think the viewer, like I said, has no idea, but to a filmmaker, it's like, wow, it's pretty incredible. A lot of big decisions being made behind the scenes. I can tell.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of big and little decisions, you know. Um, yeah, it, it's a collaborative effort. No one person has all the answers, but you can only hope to kind of create an alchemy among the team that, you know, allows that collaboration to, reach its finest.
That's a tough act to follow. So what are you working on now? What can we see from Phil
It is a tough
Bertelsen?
act to follow.
Yeah, what do you do from there? Like after you make that film, then what?
I have, that's what I asked myself. One of the things I asked myself was, where do you go from here? It's like, you just go forward, you just continue to do the work that, you're called to do. Um, I went from there, I went on to do an episode of a series based on the 1619 Project, which I think you can still find on Hulu. I was fortunate enough to make a World War II tank battalion documentary with Morgan Freeman, where I helped him learn about some of his long lost World War II veteran relatives.
Wow.
That's also streaming on Hulu. And most recently, I have a series on PBS about Black and Jewish America. It's 4 parts, kind of dual biography about Blacks and Jews in America and Black Jews as well.
Well,
Yeah,
you just pick light
just keep
subjects.
on keeping on.
What about a new series where you pitch Abdul another question? You feed this guy another. Is he done with Malcolm X? And you just give this guy another question, and you just let him run, and you just grab your camera and just chase after him and hope you can keep up.
I would love that. He's still kind of in the Malcolm sphere.
Okay.
I'm not sure he's asking the right questions, but he's doing his thing. Yeah, I don't know that, I think, look, my ideal world, we would have an opportunity to revisit, these stories and these people and their families including the Shabazz family on their journey toward justice. But I don't know if we'll have that opportunity. Well, a lot of pieces have to align. But I'm currently finishing up a film, as I mentioned earlier, about former Congressman and Black Panther Bobby Rush, who was a dear friend to the recently deceased Jesse Jackson, whose son, Jesse Jackson Jr., is running for Congress in Chicago, Illinois. And if he wins, Jesse Jackson will have 2 sons serving in Congress simultaneously.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
so
wild.
it's an interesting. And Bobby's, kind of their uncle, so that Chicago politics story that gave you Barack Obama is one that continues to this day.
Wow.
So look for that.
Wow.
We will look for that. Phil, you pick such light subjects to work
All right.
on.
I know. It's heavy, man. It's like,
And we met
they
on
pick me
Teen
now. These subjects
Moms.
pick me up.
And we met on Teen Moms
See
of all
that?
places.
We were
MTV Teen Moms.
Do you ever want to go back and just do some of that good old fun reality TV?
Yes, sir. Without question. I mean, I really would love to just do sports docs and music docs. That's really where my heart is right now. And some more episodic television. Hopefully I'll get that opportunity.
Thank you, Phil. The beauty of streaming is, even though this film is several years old, you can still watch it on Netflix. It still has relevance.
Yes.
Malcolm X's 61st anniversary of his assassination is this month. So, we can remember Malcolm X and what he brought to the world. His legacy lives on, and you guys did this incredible film and made history as well. So we thank you and your team and your time spending on the hot sheet. And don't forget to subscribe. Can you tell everybody to subscribe?
Subscribe to the hot sheet, people. And if you don't know what a hot sheet is, it's what you get the day up. You got to keep track of it. If you're swinging that camera around every corner, you want to make sure you got a hot sheet to remind the editor what the day gathered. So you're not trying to remind yourself later.
That's
Isn't that
right. It's an essential
I haven't used
tool.
it since our MTV days.
It's an essential tool. The hot sheet is an essential tool, just like the podcast. Well, thank you again, Phil. It was lovely.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Great to meet you, Jenn. Thanks so much. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It was great fun. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
All right. Take
Bye.
care.
All right.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.